this is one of my favourite insights, and it's an insight about what causes depression. And I want to start before I introduce the 3 Ps, which you may have come across before, but it's one of those ideas that I just find incredibly useful when facing any kind of difficulty. I'm going to introduce one of the commonest theories for depression. This is a theory of why people become depressed. And I just wonder how many of you, when you're low, have the I'm crap theory. Is this familiar? The reason I'm low is because I'm such a crap person. If only I was better at, if only I had done, if only, if only, if only. But we are what we are. And I'd say that to see, if you find yourself having I'm crap thoughts, think of that as a symptom of depression rather than a really good theory explaining it. So if you see it as a symptom of depression, then part of recovery is learning ways to brush it aside. And a really good diagram to brush the I'm crap theory aside is this one here. Because now this may just seem a bit modern art, but actually I see that this diagram I use a lot in teaching. And the question I ask is, which square is to blame for the circle? I think we're going to have a public inquiry and we're going to say which one is to blame. It's going to be one of them. And part of recovery is brushing blame thinking aside. There's a lovely saying, move from blame to responsibility. Blame is looking for someone to point the finger at, and if you're depressed, you quite often point it at yourself. And responsibility is just saying, which way do I want to go and how do I move there? But what I mean by this circle here, a circle of squares, is that pretty much anything you look at is going to be caused by more than one thing at the same time. And it's useful to think of 3 different groups of causes. That there are the background causes. I think if there's a play of depression, there's scene 1, which is the backstory. You know, what goes on in the past, the risk factors, family history, genetics, the rate of unemployment at the time. Interestingly, the level of gap between the very richest and very poorest in society is a major risk factor for depression, that countries have very unequal distribution of wealth, have much higher levels of mental illness, including depression. There's a great book out called The Spirit Level that looks into inequality as a background cause of mental health problems. So predisposing factors, individual and also collective, but also often with any kind of problem there's a trigger. The trigger is what tips it over the edge, and we know that people have a lot of life events, when particularly bereavement and loss. That can be one of the things that tips you over into depression. But also what's really important in understanding what happens when people get low is that you can get into a self-perpetuating spiral. That your response to feeling low actually makes you lower. I work with this a lot in my work in the addictions field, where people drink heavily when they're low as a way of cheering themselves up. And the problem goes, but it comes back with interest. It goes and it comes back with interest in a way that creates a self-amplifying loop that is like a snowball rolling down a hill. And you can also have that with depression, where when you're low you may not feel like talking to people, you may even not feel like looking after yourself and eating properly. And so when the response to a problem is a cause of the problem, you have something that feeds on itself. So just whenever you're low, just say, okay, what are my 3 Ps? You know, what's in the background? What's the trigger? And also what's keeping it going. But what we're really interested in here is, what are the 3 Ps of resilience? What are the 3 Ps of recovery? If we were to turn it round, and instead of talking about risk factors, we were to be talking about protective factors, what makes us less likely, but also, this is such a great word, protective processes. Protective processes are things that we do that protect us from the risk of depression. And there's no guarantee here. It's not like, if I do this, if I write my 3 things at the end of the day, what went well today. I think of each time you do a protective practice, it's a vote. It's a vote for what you want to happen. And unlike elections that only happen every few years, the thing about this kind of voting is you can have loads of votes every day. You say, what's my hope of what I want my mood to move towards? And by getting into the practice and reminding yourself, what are my SSRIs? What are my strategies? What are the strengths I want to keep practicing? What are the resources I turn to? What are the insights? Insights are like the sayings you have for yourself. And I think of the 3 Ps as a really important one. There's an image for this protective process, and I kind of want to end on this really. And this is a metaphor often used in holistic medicine, that health is a bit like coasting along in a boat, and illness is a bit like when you crash into a rock. And you can use this way of thinking about a cold, a heart attack, but also depression. It's not just the rocks that you bump into, but it's also your water level. And the water level is like your level of resistance to a problem. And that when you're feeling resilient in yourself, when you're feeling at a high level, when you've been doing your your positive psychology practices, you raise the water level in a way that you float over situations that you might otherwise crash into. So think of this evening, both what Miriam's been saying, what Phil's been saying, what I've been saying, as an invitation to reflect on your water level and what you can do to raise it. And particularly thinking about what are your SSRIs, the things that raise it up, that make that more likely. And by the way, I've done a handout, and it's downstairs, and it costs 10 quid. And most of what I've been saying is in there and more. But we're going to be moving now into a panel, because I've been talking, Miriam's been talking, Phil's been talking, but we want to actually just bring this open for the last 20 minutes or so to share this. So I'm going to stop at this point and say thank you for your attention.